Hi guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. All right, as you could see there, we have my guest joining me. His name is Victor Aliko. He's a development economist and policy analyst. Hello, Victor, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy, for having me.
Now, let's get started. Inflation numbers from the NBS showed us that headline inflation rose to 33.95%. So many numbers, you know. I wonder how I keep up. And month-on-month inflation declining. Can you speak to me about inflation behavior in the country, in Nigeria, at least in the last 1 year?
Okay, so in the last 1 year, the current administration met inflation at about 22%. At the moment, it's 33.9%. So the inflation behavior in Nigeria is one that is affected by government policies, sometimes attitude of Nigerians towards consumption, and sometimes activities that happen outside the Nigerian market, or what we call the international market. So these factors are associated by government policies. For instance, when the subsidy was removed, both for PMS and for electricity. Again, when we had the floating of the naira, or what we call the unification of the exchange rate, these government policies have hitherto affected inflation. And again, the recent conversation around the minimum wage is projected to also affect inflation behavior in the country. So we expect that the last 1 year, inflation has moved or surged at a rate that is a bit alarming, again, because of some of these adjustment in government policies that have not had maybe perhaps what we'll call decisions of government to cushion these inflationary pressures on the economy. So basically, inflation is majorly affected by government policies and consumption behaviors of vast majority of Nigerians.
So you're tending to government policies, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
More sure. And Nigerians' behavior.
Yes.
Do you perhaps mean the import dependency, that we depend on imported goods? Is that the angle you're looking at?
Yes. And again, in terms of, because inflation has a way of affecting the spending power, the purchasing power of Nigerians. So Nigerians have adjusted to the current economic realities. Some of the things that are not essential have been discarded. You have businesses at the moment, for instance, DSTV coming out to say they have lost some customers recently. So Nigerians are now going for more essential commodities, goods or services, and discarding the ones that they can have alternative or make do without. So some of these changes in behavior can also affect inflation in an economy.
I think we'll come back to the impact of inflation, perhaps on households, individuals, and businesses. You just said one of them. But if we still take a look at, let's really analyze inflation behavior and the underlying causative factor, why inflation is high in Nigeria, assuming that the president did not take off fuel subsidy or did not go ahead to implement the policy, because the argument from the government is that President Buhari, did not put money for subsidy from June, that from July to December of 2023, there was no money.
Budget, yes.
So it tried to also push the bucket, the blame to former President Buhari. But whatever it is, President Tinubu announced it at the Good Square here in Abuja. Assuming that the president did not announce that, do you think it would have been a different scenario now?
Yes, it would have been a different scenario. But again, let's look at issues around insecurity, which is, again, largely responsible for the inflationary pressure we have in the country. Let's also not forget external influences like the Russian-Ukraine war. Ukraine is one of Nigeria's trade partners. The tension between China and Taiwan in the Red Sea is also a factor. More recently, the war between Palestine and Israel. So all of these international factors, or sometimes post-COVID-19 recovery, are also part of the factors that is also fueling inflation. So these international factors and insecurity, again, would have partly exacerbated inflation, but not at the rate it is at the moment. But those two key policies were largely responsible for the surge in inflation at a level we have not seen in the last 28 years.
So our inflation is really more locally induced than
Yes.
globally induced.
Yes, because of government policies. So if you look at government policies, floating the naira was a mistake, particularly when you're an import-dependent economy. Perhaps the government should have held on a little bit to conclude up the Port Harcourt refineries or get the Dangote refinery working before floating the currency. That's one.
So the two policies wouldn't have gone together in terms of fuel subsidy removal and devaluation of the naira.
Yes, yes. So it was what I call a policy. It was policy incoherent. So this is part of what some persons will call policy suicide. It shouldn't have happened. Even when the subsidy, some persons clamored it should have been removed. They would have adopted a phased approach in removal of subsidy. You don't announce outright removal of subsidy overnight. But there's something I usually tell people. When President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came on board, he appointed, before his inauguration, he appointed a 4-man committee led by the current CBN governor, the current Minister of
Finance.
Trade. No, not Minister of Finance, I wasn't part of it. The current Minister of Trade, Dr. Anyete. She was part of it. The CEO of African AFC,
okay.
African Finance Corporation.
I'm trying to remember the
and
committee.
The chairman was the chairman was Senator Abiru.
Okay.
And the institution or the agency organization that joined was KPMG. These 5 individuals was the PAC, that's the PAC, Policy Advisory Committee of the President, that advised him, and these were the 4 individuals and one organization that advised him to remove subsidy on his first day on inauguration. And it was a wrong mistake.
How do you know that? That they were the ones that
clearly,
perhaps because it seems that the president also spoke of
scripts. That was the mandate he gave to them. He gave them a mandate.
But if you look at what happened at the Eagle Square, though it's like a year now, it seems as if the president just spoke of scripts. Perhaps to impress Nigerians that he's taking bold reform, not even Nigerians, or even international organizations or multilateral organizations. And they really clap for him. In fact, that day, Baba go fast, from Baba go slow, that we had. I know I read, what was it? Not New York Times now. We'll come back to New York Times reports. What's the other one? I forgot.
Which of the reports?
Is it Economic Times? I can't remember now.
The Economist?
Yeah. That did a report. A lot of international organizations have also been writing. Yes. The World Bank, IMF, they commended President Tinubu. Oh, bold reforms, bold reforms, bold reforms. In fact, in the Nigeria Development Update for last year too, bold reforms. There was a report that was released for Nigeria, turning the corner. How can we now move from renewed hope, to actions?
Sure.
So perhaps President Tinubu just went off script.
I don't think so. So if you look at the way it was removed and the action that followed afterwards, it wasn't something that was done to excite. So if you look at, I just want to look at the mandate of that
That
pact.
buttresses my point. The action that followed later was that there was a press release that said fuel price should be frozen.
It was a political statement.
Okay.
It was clearly a political statement.
Because we saw an increase later.
Yes, something as
from
sensitive,
600 to about
something as sensitive as fuel, which we know its impact on the economy. You can announce it. In fact, those who bought the fuel stations or gas stations that got this fuel before the inauguration at affordable prices, they had to start hoarding. The moment the announcement was made, it led to an instantaneous hoarding of PMS, and the new price was adjusted immediately. So there's no way, even NNPC in the next few days went ahead and brought out the new price template. So there's no way I would want to believe it was an announcement just to excite the international community. And again, another thing I tell people is, when I feel, speaking as a man outside the fence, I feel that when the new administration came on board, they looked at the economy together with KPMG and these 4 individuals I mentioned. And they looked at the financial strength, particularly from the fiscal side. Look at what the government have in their coffers. So they had to go with a quick fix. What is the quick fix? The quick fix was for them to remove subsidies, because these are the easiest way they can have some revenues left for themselves. Nigeria was already battling a lot of, was in a dire fiscal position as suggested by the World Bank and some of our lenders. So they had to go with the fastest and the shortest route, which was to remove subsidies. And again, remember, removing subsidy actually made our fiscal position better for the World Bank and some of our lenders to give us more loans. So that was the quick fix they went for. So I don't want to believe it was an announcement that was done just to excite Nigerians and the international community.
It didn't excite us.
It was intentional.
It did not excite
It was intentional. For them, they said it was bold reforms, bold. But again, the approach was wrong, horribly wrong. The timing was ill-timed. There was no mitigation plan. I would have thought that the government would have made a supplementary budget for the next 6 months. Let's supplement for subsidy payment in the next 6 months. 6 months is enough for you to understand the workings of the economy. 6 months is enough for you to get stakeholders involved and see how you can make measures to mitigate the impact and adopt a phased approach. You can't just remove subsidy outrightly.
Now, the cost of the removal of subsidy, do you think that with where the economy is right now, that perhaps the presidency is regretting it? In terms of the cost, perhaps we would have left this subsidy because the country snowballed into something else. One of the worst economic crises that we've had in decades, like 3 decades. And that will bring me later to the New York Times report I read, that was not too good. But when I also read the New York Times report, I was like, come on, guys, why are you people getting so fussy? Because it's in foreign media. This is what I say here all the time.
Yes.
What the New York Times wrote is what I mention here all the time. And, of course, data was gotten from what we also have access to. But because it's foreign media, that was not good optics for the country. The presidency also had to respond. So if you take a look at that, the cost of the removal vis-a-vis that if you take a look at it now, many Nigerians just feel we're not getting anything again from this country. Because the fuel subsidy was the way Nigerians felt, okay, government is working for us in one way. That fuel was at 190 something or 200 naira a litre. With the removal now, the naira's volatility in the last couple of months, there's nothing we are gaining from this government. If government now says, I know, government will tell me, Nancy, we've been doing cash transfer to how many millions of families and all of that. Not all of us have it. Then the band A, the energy. Okay,
So I think, humanly speaking, I'm speaking on the basis of, perhaps for those in power, if they still have some bit of conscience left in them, I want to believe they would be regretting the decision. But again, the actions in the last few months have shown that it's possible they might not be regretting the decision. So why am I saying that? The removal of subsidy, apart from the government on admitting it was a wrong move, it has had a lot of devastating effects on Nigerians. And I'll give you a few of them. If you look at between 2022 to 2023, when the World Bank Development Update, biannual update was released, the assumption was that when inflation was about 15%, they said about 6 million Nigerians fell below the poverty line. So it means 6 million Nigerians became poorer. So I don't know what the figures are at the moment if that same economic update was to be released. We have an economy where if you look at Austrian-based World Poverty Clock, Nigeria has the highest. As of today, Nigeria has about 71 million people living in extreme poverty below $1.9 per day. Seconded by India, that used to be the first before. So if you look at issues around multidimensional poverty as released by MBS, 133 million. If you look at World Bank Development Update, about 90 million Nigerians. All of this is just to tell us a story that the impact on Nigerians is huge. But now let me speak briefly on the impact on individual household, businesses, and the larger economy. So if you look at for Nigerians, it has hitherto affected our disposable income. Labor recently is agitating that because of the recent economic realities, $20 on a monthly basis or 30,000 naira minimum wage can no longer fly. So we need more money to match up with the economic reality. That's for households. Now, if you look at businesses, a lot of businesses are struggling to survive. A lot of them are exiting the country. A few top businesses are exiting the country. If you look at Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, recently said 60% of businesses in the north closed down as a result of insecurity and sometimes the impact of inflation on the economy. That's for businesses. Now, if you look at the larger impact on the macro level, inflation that is surging is making, remember, the MPC of the CBN to increase interest rates. And when you're increasing interest rates, ideally it's supposed to attract foreign investors. But foreign investors are still not coming, despite the surge in interest rates.
No,
and again, it's contracting.
At the last meeting that we're having foreign inflow, I think about
we
3
are
billion.
having. We are. We are not
But
seeing
that's
them.
foreign portfolio
We have had
investors,
occasions, I think on 2 occasions where they said there was foreign investors that were coming that they later denied to be false. those investors actually came out to say it's not true. So it's having a devastating effect on the economy. But what we want to see is Nigerians don't want the blame game. Again, going back to the New York Times report, the feedback that was given, it's not time to share blames with the past administration and all that. It is a responsibility you owned up. You were part of those who brought the past administration. You were now in government to fix the issues or the so-called dead economy. Nigerians don't want excuses. Fix the economy.
Okay, let's take a look at government handling of this inflation. Earlier on during my intro, I mentioned that the government went ahead. President Tinubu put together a committee, I think a food emergency response plan. When was that? A few months ago, actually, perhaps in July of last year, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of people have been asking the question, where is the Minister of Agriculture in all of this? Because food is a major component. Food inflation definitely is more than 40% as we speak. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so food inflation is one of the most devastating. It's heartbreaking because one would assume that for food, it should be the most affordable. We were taught that there are 3 basic needs of life: food, shelter, and clothing. Food is one of them. If you look at Maslow's theory of need, it's one of the most essential basic needs of life. One of the most cheapest and affordable food staple is gari in the market. The bag of gari now in the north is nearly about 120,000. In the south, in Port Harcourt, for instance, about 180,000 a bag. And we used to believe that when we were in school, if you're hungry or if you're poor, or if you can't afford anything, the simplest of things to take is to soak gari.
Yes.
So it has become so expensive. Gari is no longer an average food or a poor man's food. It's a food now for the rich. If you also take a look at what is happening in tomato paste, it's sad that the Minister of Agriculture came up and said the tomato paste scarcity in the market was caused as a result of a pest that was gotten from Spain. And he went further to say that this same tomato paste pest came up in 2015. And sadly, 9 years after that pest came up, there was no research that was done. It's a pest. It's not like it's a virus. It's a pest. If you're investing in research, if you take a sample of the affected tomatoes and go to the lab, Nigerians have some of the best agriculturists who can come up with a sample, develop a pesticide to terminate the pest affecting tomato paste. But this has not been done. So, but what we get is Nigerians finding it difficult to afford even 2 square meals. We're no longer talking of 3 square meals at the moment. If you visit United Kingdom with £2, you can buy a crate of egg. But in Nigeria, a crate of egg now is nearly more than 4,000 naira. That's the cost. That's even not up to...
£2 is more than 4,005.
Well, of course, there's what we call purchasing power parity. And you cannot compare the British economy and that of Nigeria on that basis.
Yeah, you can't say £2
yes,
if is equal to 2
yes,
naira, for example.
Clearly we cannot.
Yes.
If you also look at the minimum wage, in UK it's about £10, in Nigeria, that's per hour.
Now, let's delve a bit into the issue of tomato, because that is really very emotional part. You've spoken about one emotional part, which is gari. A lot of us soak gari. At all, not bad. You drink gari, you are okay.
Yeah.
You put sugar. If you don't get sugar, if you put salt. But now, Nigerians cannot even afford gari, let alone tomato. The seasonality of the commodity has also been brought to bear. Do you think that is not also an issue? Or perhaps the headline inflation itself is impacting the cost of tomato? I know that tomato Ebola, or is it tuta absoluta?
Yes.
I think that's the pest that impacts tomato. Is an insect that ravages tomato farms. You've just talked about government inability to combat the situation if they saw that happening. How do you think that we can now handle the situation? Because normally tomatoes in rainy seasons are expensive, but not as expensive as they are now. That a dustbin basket now goes. The last time I priced it, I was told 15,000. Is it 17,000? I just left the aboki. I said, okay, thank you. Let me go and use the remaining paste that I have at home.
Sure.
You know, and I see a lot of people now coming up with innovative ways of avoiding tomato. People are cooking cucumber stew, carrot stew. Yeah. Carrot itself is also very expensive. You know, so what do you have to say about that?
So for inflation, there's a supply side of it, and I think that's part of the challenge. The foods are not available. The few available ones are not enough. A lot of farmers in the north have resorted to smuggling this food out of the country to sell in neighboring countries where they can make more profit. So we cannot remove the Nigerian factor away from it. So if we think inflation in Nigeria goes just beyond the economic factors, we might not be telling ourselves the truth. So there are issues around hoarding, for instance. At the moment, you have onion is in large supply at the moment with the current season. So a lot of farmers can decide to buy these onions, stockpile it, keep it until when the price surges or until when it is not onion season and they want to make more profit. So there's a human part of it. There's a Nigerian factor to inflation. People want to use any small opportunity to extort other Nigerians. But again, that's where conversations around having price board, whether it's necessary and all that. But to be candid with you, we need to fix the issue of insecurity. Farmers need to go back to the farm. So long as farmers are not on the farm, we continue to have food inflation at the level it is, 40.6. That is highly alarming. We need to fix insecurity. And perhaps farmers need to be incentivized. There are conversations around releasing fertilizers to farmers and all that. But first is safety. Apart from safety of farmers, infrastructure again. So I'll give you an example. If you look at what's happening, the northern part of Nigeria is mainly agrarian. Yes, it's mainly agrarian. So if there is, for instance, a train that can connect from, let's say, Maiduguri, for instance, or maybe Kaduna or Jos, that's the hub of tomato production in Nigeria, down to Port Harcourt. And in few hours, you can transport it without necessarily using PMS that's affecting the economy, the high cost of PMS. It perhaps will reduce the cost. So another key component is electricity. If electricity is not fixed, to store some of those tomatoes, electricity is key. Man has come out to say 40% of their revenue is going on electricity. And it is alarming. That means if we have a commodity that is sold at 1,000, if electricity is fixed today, Nigeria has at least a fairly stable power supply, prices can drop to about 40%.
Hospitals are also complaining. Teaching hospitals across the country that I read a report that I think 15 million naira is used to buy electricity daily. For a teaching hospital. Like they can't survive.
It's horrible.
Patients will die if they switch off. Okay, just as we end, because we have about 2 minutes to the end of this show, let's talk about the New York Times report. When you read it, how did you feel as a Nigerian, and what's your takeaway from that? Do we have takeaways from that? Let's quickly take takeaways from that report. We were able to put some bullet points together from it. That's it. So that's what the New York Times is saying on Nigeria. Okay.
So
go ahead.
Clearly, I understood the part of the government trying to protect Nigeria's corporate image by coming to debunk the report. But again, it's the clear truth of what is happening in the Nigerian economy. Those articles were not written by Nigerians. It's a clear example. They cited examples. They mentioned names. They mentioned locations where this incident happened. And one of the striking parts was that they said the Nigerians are good in enduring some of this.
We are resilient.
But we have been stressed to a limit.
Yeah.
So it's a clear scenario of what is happening. The government cannot come to deny it. These countries, they have their embassies in Nigeria. They have their economic advisors who are Nigerians. And they are seeing the trend in the economy. Nigerians are getting poorer. Nigerians can no longer feed. Businesses are shutting down on a daily basis. Employment is going to surge. Again, it's going to have ripple effect on insecurity. If Nigerians can no longer feed, they will devise alternative means of survival. And that is clearly what is happening. But my candid advice to Mr. President is that they have to come as quickly as possible to address the issue before it snowballs into something that may not be comprehensible. It's almost at the breaking point, and they have to come quickly to address it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Victor, for coming today. So much to take away from the New York Times report on Nigeria. Of course, part of what I also liked was, the practicality of that report, bringing up pictures, even women suffering from lack of calcium, a doctor just being in one health center. That come on,
locations.
I think this
is precise.
It's anyway. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Let's just end on this note, so that we can go and prepare again for tomorrow. That's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. I've been speaking with Victor Aliko, who is a development economist. I'll see you all again tomorrow, God willing. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. Bye for now. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.